Research. My name is Martha Aitken, Senior Associate for Metropolitan Extension for Washington State University, and your host for the broadcast. And today I'm working alongside our broadcast engineer, Tara Zimmerman. The Western Center for Metropolitan Extension and Research was established by the Western Extension Directors Association with funding from the extension programs of the University of Alaska Fairbanks, University of California, Colorado State University, University of Idaho, Oregon State University, and Washington State University, who hosts the center. Before we get started, if you haven't used GoToWebinar before, I'd like to go over a few useful features. The webinar will work best on your computer if you close other applications while you participate. On the menu bar, the blue screen button lets you toggle between a full screen and partial screen. If you want to view the webinar at full screen, you will want to toggle back to enter a question in the questions pod. The orange arrow opens and hides your control panel. You may enter your questions into the questions pod at any time. However, we will wait until the end of the program to ask questions of our presenter. Our webinar today is being recorded for later viewing, including all questions posted in the questions pod. The Western Extension Directors established the Center to increase the internal capacity of extension programs to address metropolitan issues and to elevate the stature and value of cooperative extension to external metropolitan audiences. The overarching goal of the Center is to help extension better align programs with the needs, issues, and interests of their metropolitan constituency. The Center believes that to be successful, extension professionals need essential skills to thrive in today's diverse and complex metropolitan communities, such as the ability to work across generations and the skills to work within multi-stakeholder collaborations. To reach this goal, the Center will provide professional development opportunities through staff exchanges, webinars, and workshops, such as the upcoming Extension as Urban Policy Advisors in early December. We'll tell you more about that at the end of the broadcast. The Center has a two-pronged research agenda: to conduct research on effective metropolitan organizational and staffing models and best practices in programming, delivery, and evaluation, and to explore emerging metropolitan issues where land-grant universities can contribute to decision-making and policy development. Through such objective research and recommendations, extension programs will be able to provide communities with a basis for informed decision-making. Before we get started with today's presentation, we have a few questions for you to see who's on our webinar today. And Tara, could you please launch those polls? The first question we'd like you to answer is to please select the program area where you work, and you can select all that apply. And we'll close the poll and show the results. And your second question, what is your primary role within your organization? And we'll close that poll and show the results. And our final question, what is your position within your university? And we'll close that poll and show those results. Thanks, everyone. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce today's presentation, Metropolitan Extension Best Practices, What is Our Research Base? Marie Rumenap has worked for Michigan State University Extension for 29 years in both educational and administrative positions. She's currently assigned to the MSU Extension Director's Office, working on special assignments as part of the organizational development team. Previously, Marie was the MSU District Coordinator for Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb counties, which encompass the greater Detroit metropolitan area. In this role, she provided administrative leadership for 11 extension offices. Prior to that, Marie was Regional Director for Southeast Michigan, a 13-county area which is home to approximately 60% of Michigan's residents, and where she provided administrative leadership to 325 extension professionals. Marie received a bachelor's in agriculture and natural resource communications and a master's in community services, both from Michigan State University. In addition to her current appointment, Marie is working on her PhD at Michigan State in urban and regional planning. And joining Marie today is WCMER Director and my WSU colleague, Brad Gerlach. Marie and Brad, great to have you here. Welcome to the webinar.
Great, thank you, Martha, and it's nice to be on this side of the microphone. And as we get the slides up for the part of the presentation here, I just want to give a little bit of a background, is that the discussions about the role, the impact, and the visibility of extension in metropolitan and urban communities is really not new. And you can go back as far as 1966 and see where the Ford Foundation sort of commissioned a study to see how urban extension can be used to assist the Ford Foundation. And you see sort of in 1996 was one of the, I would say, foundational papers of where ECOP's Urban Task Force tried to look at what is the role for urban extension. In 2001, discussions were being talked about between extension and housing and urban development, or the HUD program of the federal government. And then sort of a little bit more recently is the 2008 extension in the Urban West paper that was sort of commissioned by the Western Extension Directors Association, and that was really the foundation for the establishment of the Western Center. And so with this little bit of a background of knowing that there's been discussions around what the role is of extension in urban areas, being based in academic institutions, the center really felt that one of the first things it was for us to do was to look at what our research base is, and then we can start building more from that as to how does the center help extension become more relevant. So what we decided to do was to develop and utilize our Center Fellow program, where we were going to commission a study of what is that literature base. And so our first cut at this was to really do a very broad-based look at what are peer-reviewed articles and a much broader look at some of reports and white papers around extension in metropolitan or urban areas. And so we did that with Marie, and I'll turn over the details of what she has done to Marie to continue the presentation.
Great, thank you, Brad. Well, the first thing that I'm going to do, if I can get my slides to advance here, there we go, is to talk a little bit about the methodology that we used for the literature review. There were several steps involved. The first thing we did was for Brad and I to sort of sit down and talk about the direction that we wanted to take and a little bit about the search engines that we might use, as well as the search terms. With that direction, I then reviewed the major search indexes available for the relevancy of the literature that they covered, and spent some time consulting with the subject librarian at the Michigan State University Library, who was very helpful in laying out the search process. Secondly, I did a search for literature from 2000 to 2015, except for in a couple cases we were looking to identify some of the historical literature that might be out there and available around urban extension. So there were two search terms that I'll talk a little bit about a little later in the presentation. but they were cooperative extension and urban or metro, and university extension and urban or metro, where they searched both the Journal of Extension as well as ERIC, which is an educational search index, where I searched some of the historical data. Once I found references that might be of interest and support the research base of urban extension, these were imported into EndNote, which is a pretty common reference management software package that's used. Then I noted the number of references or citations that were found through each of the search indexes and the search terms, removing duplicate references from the database. Lastly, I entered organizational search terms to categorize references and assist in the search use by staff. So now what I'd like to do is actually spend a little bit more time talking about each one of these steps and the EndNote database that's been developed as part of this process. So next, let's start with the search indexes that we used in the order in which I used them. The first search index that I used was ProQuest, and the ProQuest research library contains over 2,000 periodicals in arts, business, children, education, general interest, health, humanities, international, law, military, multicultural, psychology, social science, and women's interests. And of particular interest, based on my discussions with the research librarian, were the ERIC Index, which is the Educational Resources Information Center. And ERIC blends two indexes of journals in education and also the research education document library, which includes conference papers, books, theses, and research reports. In addition, ProQuest is one of two search engines that search the Journal of Extension. So that was the first search engine that I used. The second was the OCLC, or First Search, and that stands for Online Computer Library Center. And this is a broad-based search engine that searches books, manuscripts, data files, maps, computer programs, musical scores, films, slides, newspapers, journals, sound recordings, videotapes, and it searches in the area of education, communicative sciences, social work, human development, and family studies. It's the second search engine that searches the Journal of Extension, and it also searches ERIC. It also, in addition to these two of interest for this particular search, it searches WorldCat, which contains more than 35 million records of library holdings from around the world. The third search engine used, EBSCO, is another broad-based search engine searching many resource databases for communication, computer, gender studies, nursing, environmental sciences, including a broad set of agricultural and biological sciences, including Agricola, which is the agricultural online access database, as well as the urban studies abstracts, which covers planning, design, and sociology subjects, all of which that would be of interest in this particular literature search. The fourth search index that was used is the Web of Science, and it includes the Institute for Scientific Information Citation Indexes, CAB Abstract, SSCI, which is the Social Science Citation Index, and these search indexes cover medical, biological, agricultural, animal, and environmental sciences, as well as geography, communicative sciences, international development, food and nutrition, social sciences, human development, and family studies. Then lastly, the search engine that I used was Google Scholar, which once again is another broad-based search engine that provides a really simple way to broadly search for scholarly literature across basically all literature fields. And this particular search engine includes peer-reviewed papers, theses, dissertations, books, abstracts, articles, and from academic publishers. It includes professional societies, preprint repositories, universities, and other scholarly organizations. Then, once I had those 5 search engines identified, I used Boolean logic, which probably most of you are familiar with. It's a system that allows a searcher to communicate to the database specific relationships between keywords or concepts when searching. And the most common used Boolean commands, sometimes logic operators, are the and, or not. And for this particular search, in every single search, I used either the and often the or operators for them. And the 10 search terms that were identified for this particular search were cooperative extension and urban or metro, which essentially means it would be looking for the term cooperative extension and then either the term urban or metro. And in this particular case, this is the one search term, or actually it's one of 2 search terms, that except for with Google Scholar, where when I searched I just ended up with thousands and thousands of resources that really, many of which didn't look fairly applicable to this literature search, I looked for literature prior to 2000. So that means when I searched ProQuest, OCLC, EBSCO, and the Web of Science, I was looking not for just literature from 2000 on, but prior to 2000 as well. The second search term was University Extension and Urban or Metro. And when I searched through ProQuest, because it looks at ERIC and the Journal of Extension again, I also looked for literature that was prior to 2000. But for this particular search term, all other searches were for literature after 2000. Then for the remainder of the search terms, I looked simply for literature from 2000 to 2015. And those search terms were cooperative extension in the city or cities, urban universities in the community, university outreach and or urban, or metro, sorry about that, university partnerships in urban or metro, university centers in urban or metro, university engagement in urban or metro, nonprofits and university in urban or metro, and then applied research in urban or metro. So as I found citations, I made no assessment about the quality of the usefulness of the reference located. Brad's going to talk a little bit about opportunities around this in the future. My role was to simply identify and collect the potential useful literature related to urban extension and areas that might be closely associated with that. So I simply did that by looking for literature using the search terms and then looking at the titles and short descriptions that were provided when the references appeared upon searching for them. Then secondly, as I searched, some things that I noted was that the search term that located the most references was cooperative extension and urban or metro. In fact, that particular term, out of the 1,995 references that I found through this search, provided 970, or a little more than 40% of the citations. Now you might think, based on what I said earlier, that I searched for literature not just 2000 through 2015, but earlier literature as well, that this might account for some of the numbers of this particular literature search. And it did, but not to the level where it basically skewed the results. In fact, out of the 970 references that I found, only 128 of them were for literature prior to 2000, and 842 were actually for literature after 2000. And every search engine that I used, this was the term that found the most references or citations, except for Google Scholar, where there were actually several search terms, which I'll show you in a few minutes, that actually found similarly large numbers of references. But for ProQuest, OCLC, EBSCO, and Web of Science, the search term cooperative extension and urban or metro definitely found the most references. Additionally, as might be expected, the different search terms found varying numbers of references. After the cooperative extension and urban and metro search term, there were 3 other search terms that found between 200 and 300 citations, and they were nonprofit and university and or urban and metro. Urban universities and the community, and then university partnerships and urban or metro. Then these were followed by 4 search terms that found between 100 and 200 citations, and they were university engagement and urban or metro, applied research, urban or metro, university extension and urban and metro, and then cooperative extension and city or cities. The last search terms, which there were 2, actually found less than 50 citations each, and they were university outreach and urban or metro, and university centers, urban and metro. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a sense of which search terms most of the literature was found under. And then returning to the comment I made earlier about Google search, after the first round of searches where I was searching under cooperative extension, urban and metro, this search index consistently produced the most results. It found probably the most varied and broad set of references out of all the search indexes. But as I looked at the titles and the information that was found, I also wondered a bit about the quality and the usefulness of some of the resources that were found, but this will kind of play out as we look at what's in this database in the future. Then secondly, the database that actually found, or search engine that actually found the least a number of references for the database consistently was Web of Science. So to give you a bit of an overview of where the citations came from, here's a chart listing the 5 different search indexes that were used, along with the 10 search terms that were used. So you can see, as I said, by far, cooperative extension and urban or metro found the most citations, and then the others just have varying numbers. In total, through this search, I was able to identify 2,357 references. 1,995 of them were non-duplicative or unique references, and this search produced 362 duplicate references. This was many more than I originally expected, so I was pleased to see this breadth of potential literature out there around urban extension. Then once I had all the references in EndNote, I basically worked to have them edited and put in the proper format. And then I quickly reviewed the citations, making some estimation of the relevance of the material to extension based on whether it would be useful around sort of general or operational extension, or whether it fit with program areas that are standardly used in Extension, and made sure that all the citations could be searched by one or more of the terms that I'll share with you in just a minute. So in addition to those search terms that were imported with the citation, each citation also carries in the key word search category one or more of these search terms. And they are general extension, which includes the historical material related to urban and metro that isn't related to any particular program area, just general information about urban and metro issues, university extension, outreach, partnerships, and community center literature that once again is not related to any particular extension program area, general information about extension and their work with nonprofits, general applied research literature not related to any program area, and then any other references or citations that were found that I could not specifically identify a programmatic focus with, contained the keyword search general CES. Then the second area is agriculture and food systems, and this area includes references or citations that appeared to be related to urban ag, gardening, master gardeners, and food systems work. The third area for search terms was community and economic development, and this area contains literature that appeared to be relevant to community development, economic development, land use, housing, and program focuses similar to this. The next was health, nutrition, and families, which included literature related to SNAP, FNAP, general nutrition, health, and wellness areas, as well as family financial literacy, literature around childcare, seniors, and anything else related to health, nutrition, and families. Then the next area was 4-H and youth development. So besides articles on these two topics, basically anything that appeared to be related to children was given a keyword search of one of these terms. And then lastly, the keyword inserted was natural resources, and it includes literature that appeared to be related to water quality, sea grant, urban forestry, insects, pests, and other natural resources related topics. Then the next thing I would like to do is actually show you EndNote. And EndNote is a basically a free online reference or citation management software that can be accessed through most university libraries free of charge through the Web of Science search index. It can also be accessed through endnote.com. And if you use it a lot, you might consider buying the software to put on your computer. And with the educational discount, generally this runs about $100, a little bit more. So with that, I'm going to leave our PowerPoint presentation for a few minutes, and we're going to take a look at EndNote. Okay, so if you actually go through your university's library and you go through the Web of Science search engine or search index, you're going to see a screen that looks like this. And up at the top of it, you'll notice that one of the tabs is EndNote. And if you click on this, you'll be prompted to set up through your university library a free online subscription or use of EndNote. It is pretty robust. However, it does not contain as many of the features as the software package that you install on your computer. So as I said, if you're using this quite frequently and you don't already have EndNote on your computer, you might consider buying the software. Once you click on EndNote, you're going to be taken into a screen that looks like this. And essentially, this is the what the database looks like. You can see over here on the left-hand side that I have the Western Center for Metropolitan Extension Urban Extension database containing 1,995 references, as well as a grouping here called duplicates, which contains the 362 references that I mentioned to you earlier that were duplicates in this process. You'll see a listing here. The online version allows you to look at 50 citations or references per page. And it just gives you a quick overview of each of the references. You can sort the references pretty easily by looking at the sort by pull-down menu. It allows you to sort by year, by title, by source, by author, a whole bunch of things here that allow for a quick searching or sorting of your materials in this database or any EndNote database. Then the EndNote database is also easily searched. Over here on the left-hand side, you see a place that says Quick Search, and you can basically choose the group. In this case, we want the Western Center for Metropolitan Extension Research Urban Extension Database. And you can search for a particular search term, such as agriculture. And with the size that this database is, it takes just a minute to find the references. You'll see here that it's found basically the sets of materials that are related to agriculture or in some way have referenced agriculture in the documents. You can also search for such things as 4-H. When you do this, you want to make sure that you're choosing the right grouping before you do your search. And so in this particular case, you can see the sorts of things that it found. When you open it up, you'll get information about the type of reference, of course the author, the title, the year. Most of the citations contain a short abstract. You'll see here that it also indicates that this particular document is attached. I have found as many of the references as I possibly could, and those will be provided to the Western Center. However, if you're searching this database online, you won't be able to access those documents, but you would be able to, and Brad's going to talk about this in a little while, be able to request them possibly through the Western Center if you're not able to find them. But each of the citations also contains information about the URL that you see here as to where you can actually search and find those particular documents. If you wanted to search youth development, or any phrase that has 2 words, you'll notice that if I search it youth development, it's going to find both phrases that within the citations where it says youth development, as well as development and youth. And so if you particularly want both phrases together, you need to put quotations around the search term. In order to find only those citations that relate to youth development. So you'll see here's one of the citations it found, and the title contains both youth development, and the phrase youth development is also contained within the journal name. Same with this one. The search also allows you to search by title or by particular audience, or excuse me, not audience, particular author. Brad mentioned earlier that one of the first pieces of literature that talked about urban extension work was a report published by the Ford Foundation. So let's see if we can find that one in the search. And here you'll see that we've found 4 references that the author is either the Ford Foundation or someplace in the document or the citation it references the Ford Foundation. This first document is actually the one that Brad mentioned. And you can see it was published in 1966. This particular document is attached along with a short abstract. Another one of the documents that Brad referenced was by an author named Phyllis. So let's search that. And you'll notice here that Chester Phyllis actually has 2 documents that were found through this literature search. The first one that was published in 1992 about urban extension programs, and then a second that was published in 2005 calling for visionary leadership around urban extension. So that's a quick overview of EndNote, the databases, and how to search and find them. So let's move back to the PowerPoints. And as I move back to the PowerPoints, I'm going to actually turn it back over to Brad to talk about sort of next steps and opportunities in this process.
Great. Thank you very much, Maria. That was a lot of great work you did, and obviously some yeoman's work there in going through all of those databases and search terms. And I just wanted to give folks a sense of where we're moving on this project. So part of what we wanted to do is, we're definitely going to pursue publishing this work in a Joe article or an other publication that will, sort of add to the research base, because obviously, as we mentioned, we wanted to make sure not only are we well grounded in our research base, but that we also continue to build on that. We also are thinking about setting up a fellows program, like I mentioned a little bit, within the center that would allow individuals to do some deeper dive into specific content area. As Marie mentioned, when we kind of went into this project, we weren't really certain how many sources we would find and if it was feasible to ask Marie to evaluate every piece of literature and sort of do a meta-analysis. And as she got started and was finding, looking like there's going to be 2,000 sources, we realized that that was unrealistic in this first shot, and so that the first shot being, can we collect the basic level of how many resources are out there, and then we can go into finding individuals who might want to be a little more evaluative of given sources based on a content or expertise. And we sort of thrown up a little bit of the 3 types of questions we thought that might come about, say if you were interested in looking at community and economic development in metropolitan areas. These could be guiding questions by which you would go through and evaluate the literature. And as I said, we're be working with my advisory board and the university's extension programs that support the Western Center on maybe providing some funding for fellowships to do this with the Western Center. And then also, as Marie mentioned, is we're looking at how do we make this database both available and keep it updated, because we think, obviously a lot of effort went into collecting this, and how do we make it of the greatest value? Through the online approach, it's probably much easier for folks to be able to use it and search, and we can have people sort of join a community of practice around it, and that would be easy. I think the advantage, though, is for those of you who would download and have a desktop version of the software to where you could actually have PDFs of the individual articles that you could search and read and mark up yourself. And I would add, one of the advantages of if you have the desktop version, I don't think this works in the online version, is you can actually have an application within Microsoft Word that lets you cite while you write. So while you're writing one of your journal articles, you can actually go in and tap into the database, select the citation you want to use, and you also then choose the format you want to use, and it will automatically put that citation into your Word document and then automatically generate your sources cited or resources page, so you can dynamically do that, and it automatically updates so you don't have to write it and then go back and find the articles and change the citation, and if you delete one, figure out did you delete that from your abstract from your sources cited list or not. So what we're trying to do is figure out how can we make that most advantageous to the community out there, and then see about how do we keep it updated if that's feasible. So I think that sort of ends the presentation that we were going to go with, and I think we're ready to move towards any questions the audience may have, and I think Martha was going to sort of handle managing some of those questions.
Sure,
Brad,
I'll do that. Oh, go ahead, Marie.
I was going to say, Brad, let me comment. You mentioned cite as you write, and the online version does allow you to do that as well. You do have to download like an add-on for Word, but both versions, the online and the software on your computer, allow that. And the other thing that I would mention is if you use a different citation management software such as Mendeley, I know for sure that this EndNote database can be downloaded and converted into that. I've never used Zotero or any of the other citation management softwares, but I have Mendeley, and I know it's importable into that, so I suspect it would be into others as well if you feel more comfortable with something other than EndNote.
Thanks, Marie. We do have a couple of questions that have come in, and those of you out there, if you have any, please do type them into the questions pod. We have a couple of questions about the search itself. Did your search include extension bulletins and fact sheets, or just journal articles?
It also contained extension fact sheets and bulletins. But one of the things that I did find through this search and in my consultations with the Agriculture and Extension Reference Librarian here at MSU is that it found things from several universities in terms of bulletins and fact sheets pretty regularly, but not consistently across the system. And in talking with the reference librarian, one of the things that she noted was, as Extension has went to more online publication of our bulletins and fact sheets, we as a system haven't been real good maybe about getting them to our local university libraries in order to catalog and enter into the search engines that find these references. And so consequently, that is a literature database, or literature base, excuse me, that we're losing. And so from this literature review, one of the things I did do was talk internally with the extension people here at MSU about the necessity for us to get more connected with the Michigan State University Library and get them copies of these online or electronic fact sheets and bulletins that we're publishing so that they could get into these search engines and they could be found by people. I know we had a lot of discussion early on about whether they would even be available by searching through Google Scholar, and we found that they were not. If we used simply a Google search, they were found through our websites, but any sort of scholarly search engine that we used was not finding a lot of these fact sheets and bulletins from most universities. So it does include what I could find, but I think as a system, we're kind of missing the boat here in terms of making sure the vast majority of fact sheets and bulletins that we publish electronically are searchable through scholarly databases.
Thanks, Marie. Another question about this search. Were the search classification categories mutually exclusive, meaning a given citation was assigned a single category, or was there an overlap, for example, youth and nutrition?
There was overlap with a good number of them, and the example that is being asked about is a perfect sort of example. And so if it was a citation that appeared to be both about youth and or children and nutrition or wellness, it contains both of those search terms.
Great, thank you. When will the database be available, and how will we be able to access it?
We're sort of, I think, Marie, you can chime in here too, but I think we're going to kind of finalize the classification and get those set up, and then we'll be doing some further refinement of sort of how does EndNote online work in accessibility. But I would expect we should have the online version available by the beginning of 2016, and then a little bit of refinement on the actual, I would say, a downloadable version, which would be where you'd have all of the PDFs that are available. That probably will be, maybe into the end of January or February of next year. And we probably will do some way by which, folks kind of register is maybe a bit strong of a word, but sort of we find out who's using the database so that, as part of measuring the impacts of the Western Center and the value to those funders is that we'll be able to count the number of uses and figure out a way by which we can also understand how it's being used so that we can measure that kind of impact of doing this type of work. Did you have anything to add, Marie, kind of in timeline there?
Nope, that's the goal.
Sounds like a good goal. I think we have time for one more question, and that is, can you explain more about the fellows idea you mentioned?
Yeah, so this sort of using Marie to help us accomplish this work was sort of our initial foray into thinking about one of the roles the center can play, in that we identify opportunities or needs, but the center is a staffing of sort of one or maybe two, depending on how we want to count folks, and it's only part of their job. And so it's not something that the center has staffing to conduct a lot of work, but what we're looking at is how can we maybe organize, prioritize, and set some important work, and then identify others who can accomplish that work, and recognizing if we have the opportunity to provide, token of monetary compensation. I think Marie would be the first one to admit that the level of stipend she got as a fellow was a token and not comprehensive of the amount of time she put in, but we think that this will be a way by which, it's beneficial to a professional to do anyway, but it also then can either buy out a little bit of time or provide some operating funds for that person to work in. So sort of based on how our budget goes and or our ability to secure extramural funding, is we want to make this research fellow program work where the center can get work done, but also make sure that the work is spread out amongst extension professionals and that there is some compensation attached to that.
Marie and Brad, thank you so much, and thank all of you for participating in the webinar today, which was offered at no charge through the support of contributing members to the Western Center for Metropolitan Extension and Research. The center holds monthly webinars on the last Thursday of the month from noon to 1 p.m. Pacific time. There will be no webinar in December. However, the center is offering a professional development opportunity in Sacramento, our second extension as urban policy advisors. Offered by popular demand, the workshop provides extension professionals with practical tools for engaging in the policy arena in metropolitan communities. It features extension professionals who are working in policy successfully, and it offers an opportunity to explore your own real-life policy-related projects. The workshop is immediately followed by the National Urban Extension Leaders Meeting, which provides networking opportunities for any faculty and staff working in metropolitan communities across the country. Registration for both events is still open. Go to the WCMER website, metroextension.wsu.edu, to find out how to register and to join our email list. Once you exit this webinar, we will launch a brief survey, so please take the time to complete it to help us improve future webinars, and so we can share the value and impact of this webinar with our contributing members. That concludes our webinar for November 2015. On behalf of the Western Center for Metropolitan Extension and Research, we're so glad you joined us. We'll see you again in January.